Are you a longtime beginner or an intermediate guitarist? My checklist coming right up. Today we're not talking about level 1 beginner, someone who's just picking up the guitar, learning to tune it, playing some chords. We're talking about long-time beginner. A guitarist that's played for years, even decades, with very little progress. Let's find out if you're a long-time beginner guitarist. This checklist is based on the feedback from thousands of beginner intermediate guitar players. If you can agree to any 3 of these items on the checklist, you're probably a long-time beginner guitarist. Number 1, you spend more time searching for gear on the internet than actually playing the instrument. Try to create your own sound, keep it simple, but definitely do not spend all that time researching different gear. Play the instrument and have fun with it. Number 2, I struggle with rhythm and timing. This is one of those items, if you have good timing, it is going to put you in a lot more advanced sounding state because you're going to be locked in. You don't necessarily need to know all these extra scales and modes and stuff. If you have good rhythm and timing, you're going to sound like a good guitar player. Number 3 is I never started learning the notes on the fretboard. And wow, that just smacks me right in the face because early on, I just tried to bypass that stuff. I know a lot of you can relate to that. It's so important to look down at the guitar fretboard and know where you're at, where the next chord is at, and the root of that note or scale. And if you don't at least know some of the notes on that fretboard, you're just always going to be guessing. Number 4, I never learned basic theory. That is a big one also. Why are we pushing that stuff to the side? I think we hear things online about Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix and some other players that really don't know guitar theory. But number 1 is we're not them. They are some of the best that have ever played the guitar. We just need to at least know the fundamentals of how chords and scales connect to each other. I'm so guilty of that, trying to push that stuff aside, plow through some power chords in the pentatonic scale, thinking if I keep doing that, it's just going to magically sound better. And for me, it never did. Number 5, I'm having trouble muting the unwanted string noise. Technique is so important for a guitar player, and muting is on the top of that list for me because you control the strings of the guitar. Over the years, we need to develop a sense of muting on our left and right hand as we're playing the guitar. It's really a matter of it sounding sloppy or not sloppy. So you want to work at this. Muting is such an important technique. Number 6, I continue practicing these bad habits. And that is the definition almost of a long-time beginner. We just continue to practice these things that aren't really making sense or connecting. And for me, I just thought if I kept doing it, that it would just happen. If I just kept playing up and down the pentatonic scale faster and up and down the different positions, for me, it just never did, like I said before. And I know some of you can relate to this. We want to have fun playing the guitar. And when you have confidence in what you're doing, you will have more fun. Keep it simple. Practice good habits. Number 7 is I continue to struggle improvising with the pentatonic scale. I have so many comments on some of my lessons about beginner intermediate players struggling with improvising. And it really comes down to some things we just talked about on this list, that we don't have a good connection with the chords that we're trying to improvise over. We're just aimlessly playing up and down the pentatonic scale, hoping to hit a good note, and that's not a confident way to play. Many of our guitar heroes use the pentatonic scale for almost all their improvising, but they're very aware of the chords that they're playing over. They target some notes within that scale, and the solo will come alive. It really says something. Number 8 is I've learned many songs, but I have no idea how they connect on the fretboard. If you know 100 songs and can kind of play through them, but you don't know that why this G chord is working with the C and D chord and the G major pentatonic works over that, you're still just in this little box. You're playing these chords and a scale, but there's no connection. That's one thing we all need to stop now. Learning songs is awesome because we want to copy some of our guitar heroes, because that's fun for one thing, but it helps us be a better player. But we need to know what they're doing, what they're thinking about as they're playing some of these riffs and licks that we know and love. And number 9 could be the biggest one. I'm just lazy. And that was me. That kind of sums up everything on this list, is we just don't want to take the time to do that. Everybody wants to take shortcuts, and I think that's a lot what's going on YouTube guitar lessons. There's always somebody saying that you will instantly do this and instantly learn this. That's really never the case. You might instantly play through something, but to be proficient at it, to be confident with it, you have to practice. We're going to have to work at this stuff. The best guitar players that we know work at it probably daily for many, many years. And a lot of us don't have that kind of time, but we can have that, make at least time, several times a week to practice on things that are positive, that will kind of make our playing progress. I was a long-time beginner myself, and I can agree with everything on that list, and I'm probably thinking many of you can agree also. Now let's look at the intermediate level. So again, I'm basing this intermediate checklist on feedback that I've gotten from many thousands of beginner intermediate guitar players. And if you can agree to these statements in this checklist, you're probably an intermediate guitar player. Number 1, I have a good sense of timing. An intermediate guitar player should be able to play through some chords and change on time with your foot tapping. The sense of timing is so important, and that's a thing that the longtime beginner is kind of lacking, that timing, that pulse. And everything on this list, if you take it to the extreme, you are going to be an advanced player. These checklist items are just key components to being a good guitar player. So number 2, I know the notes of the low E and A strings. What do I mean by that is just you should be able to have those memorized as an intermediate player. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, and then the octave E. And also on the A string, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Those will take you a long way, because a lot of the scales and the chords that we play, the low root note, it dictates those on the fretboard, where they're at. Knowing where you're at is so important. It gives you a lot of confidence. Knowing that your G is here and the minor pentatonic, the root note is on that G note, you should know that. The next step with that is an intermediate player should start being able to connect that G note with this simple octave method, which is 2 frets up, 1, 2, and then 2 strings down. 1, 2 is another G string. G, G. And going up a step farther is 3 frets up, 1, 2, 3 on the D string, 2 frets down, or 2 strings down, I should say. There's another G note. That method works all over the fretboard. Right there, you just played those root notes of that G which is going to just help you locate when you improvise, when you're playing rhythm or lead. This knowledge is going to help huge. And as an intermediate guitarist, you should be able to know the chords in a key. For instance, that G, C, and D, those chords are connected to the key of G. And what does that mean? That means from the G major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4 is a C note, it's a C major chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a D note, D major, and so on. 6, E, E minor. If you know that much basic theory, it takes you a long way. Learn that fretboard, learn how those notes relate in a certain key. That knowledge right there is really simplistic. We should be learning it as a beginner. It usually doesn't come till later, more in this intermediate level, but you need to know it. Even players that claim they didn't know theory, like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, they knew this knowledge. They knew the basics, and they took the basics to the extreme with their drive and just creating their own sound. And that's what we should do as guitar players. Number 4 is I'm starting to have a good muting technique and bending and vibrato also. Just starting to make some of this stuff your own, but having a sense of muting with your right hand. I'd love to just slightly rest the palm of my hand here, right on the bridge, just barely touching the strings. Then you can control them, but also with the left hand. And then bending and vibrato. An intermediate player is not going to be perfect at this, but they're working at it. They know where. They should know where to bend to. You're trying to reach that note here. And be able to have a little bit of vibrato, not out of control. Bend a full tone up and then have a little vibrato. Those are techniques that can just make the simplest things come alive on the fretboard. Number 5 is an intermediate player should be trying to practice at least a few times a week, hopefully every day, but some of us, it's very hard to do that. But you to keep and maintain some of these techniques and be good on the guitar, you at least need to play a few times a week. And believe me, I know life gets in the way, things happen. Just have fun on it and practice when you can. Practice some of these things. Don't just noodle around, just have a purpose when you practice and you'll get some things accomplished. Number 6 is you're starting to have some confidence as you improvise rhythm and lead. You should know these bar chords and these, and know the scales that kind of connect to them, like the D major pentatonic. You're not going to be perfect at this stuff at this level, but you know the notes, you know how they connect to the chord. An intermediate guitar player should be starting to connect the chords and scales together. Number 7 is learning songs and how they relate on this fretboard. If you learn a riff, a rhythm and lead riff, we should know how that D, C, at G chord, how they relate together, why the major pentatonic works. Don't just learn those chords and maybe a couple of the lead riffs. Really look into how those connect to each other. Good guitar players, our guitar heroes, look at these chords and follow them in their rhythm playing, obviously, but even the lead lines, they are following those chords. Hopefully at this intermediate level, you're already playing with backing tracks. You're hopefully jamming with some other players also. Those are both great things to do to just continue advancing in your guitar journey. Always work on technique. We don't always have to learn these exotic scales, modes, and chords, because the simplest things can sound really nice with good technique. I'm talking about good muting, bending and vibrato, which we talked about at intermediate level, but taking that up a notch. And also the hammer-ons and pull-offs. Our guitar heroes make it look easy, but believe me, they've worked at it. Those three techniques will take you a long way. Some of our guitar heroes really just use power chords, the pentatonic scale, and some good technique to really say something when they play the guitar. I was a long-time beginner, and now I'm not. I'm the best player. I'm probably above average. I really work at it, and I have fun doing it. The older I get, the more I have fun playing this instrument we've been blessed with. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and let's talk soon.